Hey everybody, it's great to see you today. Today is March 6th, and this is Living Power, your online Bible study where we are walking through the Bible in a year. Today's reading is amazing, and if you haven't read it yet, I am going to just spoil the whole surprise. There is a talking donkey, literally. It must be the cousin of Mr. Ed, really. This donkey speaks. We can take it literally, and this is the first time that we've seen this in the Bible, an animal speaking. But we can believe that God is able to do this and that He did this to speak to this prophet Balaam. And I love this story in the Bible. It's a great one to tell your kids because it's just so amazing, a talking donkey. And the funniest part for me when I read it really wasn't the fact that the donkey was talking, even though that is amazing. The funniest thing was Balaam's response when he just started talking back to the donkey like it wasn't any big deal. He must have just watched one of those shows of Mr. Ed and thought, oh, no big deal. But I thought that was the funniest part, was when Balaam just talked right back to the donkey when he spoke to him. If it were me, I'd have fallen right off the donkey and thought, oh my gosh, what's happening here? But he didn't think anything of it. So we are in the book of Numbers, and we are studying about Balaam and Balak today. And I just want to pause here and welcome the newcomers. We've had a couple of people join in the last couple of days, and I want to thank the people that have been with me from the very beginning. There are so many of you that are committed to reading the Bible this year, straight through, cover to cover. We're using the New Living Translation, and we're using a chronological order. So for many of us, this is new because we are reading in a different order that we're not used to. But I just wanted to thank you for allowing me to come into your home each and every weekday. Thank you for just coveting with me to read the Word and just study the Bible with me. So I want to give you a little background about Balak and Balaam. Basically, it was very customary in those days to employ priests or prophets to pay for a curse. And this is what Balak did. He was the king of the Moabites. And the text says that he saw what the Israelites did to another neighboring people, and he was afraid of them. So he did what kings did back then. They paid money for a prophet to put a curse on the Israelites, hoping that this would remove their God's favor from them or really make their God unable to continue to bless them. Balak was afraid for his people. He was afraid for himself. I did notice in one of the study texts that I was using that it said in the Burmese War that the some magicians were employed to curse the British troops in that war. So evidently, this is a custom that's still used. So the king, Balak, offers a reward, and we can trust that it was a great and handsome reward. If it was a king, it would be something great, something really, really big. So that's important to remember. And Balaam, we see at face value, is a prophet. And I want us today to look at face value, some of the things that we can learn from this prophet. And so I'd like to just review the story with you for just a minute. Balak feared the Israelites, and he wants to bring a curse down on them. So he calls Balaam, who it says lived in an area near the Euphrates River, so it may have been somewhat of a trek, if you think about it, from this area near the Dead Sea. And Balaam appears to be a good guy on the up and up. When I read the text, I thought, Balaam's, right on with his thinking and what he's saying. And he says the first time that the delegation comes, it's a small delegation, and Balak's messengers ask if he would put a curse on the Israelite people. And Balaam says, well, I got to go check. I got to go ask God first, which is a very, very good response. God says he can't go. He says no. So Balaam goes back and he says, no, the Lord's told me I can't go. I'm sorry. So they go home. And then Balak does not give up, and he sends a bigger delegation, much more impressive. And what this is doing is it's almost like dangling the golden carrot there in front of Balaam. And Balaam sees how rich and powerful this king is. So he says, well, maybe I better go check again. I'll go ask God a second time. And he goes and he asks God a second time, and God says, okay, you can go. So this is when Balaam is going to the area. He's leaving his home. He's going with the delegation. This is when the talking donkey speaks. And it says that an angel of the Lord is standing in the donkey's way, and God opened his eyes, and the talking donkey was able to see the angel. And had a lot of trouble going around, and Balaam had to beat his donkey and get him to move. Finally, the donkey just sat down. He just sat down, and Balaam was so angry he beat him, and then God opened the donkey's mouth, and the donkey spoke. Have I ever done this before? Why are you beating me? And Balaam just replies like it's no big deal. You're just making me so angry. Why don't you get up? Then God opens Balaam's eyes, and he can see the angel of the Lord, and they have a talk. And the donkey is sitting, and the angel is saying, you are opposing me, and I am in your way because you are opposing me. And it looks like Balaam has repented, and it looks like everything's on the up and up. And Balaam ends up blessing Israel, does he not? 2 times, and Balak gets so mad that it says in 23:10, he clapped his hands, boop, 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 that is an Egyptian or an ancient practice, an Eastern practice. I shouldn't say Egyptian, an Eastern practice, which means he was just really, really mad. And in the end, Balak says, I'm not giving you a reward in 23:11. And Balaam ends up saying, well, let me tell you what Israel's going to do to your people. It's a true prophecy. And he ends up blessing him how many times? 4 times. At face value, it looks like Balaam has a personal relationship with the Lord. He is speaking directly to God. And it's almost like he expected God to talk with him. You remember the first time he said, I'll let you know in the morning. I'll talk to God and I'll find out exactly what he has to say. And then he says in Numbers 22:18, I love this verse, even if you give me the palace, I am powerless to do anything against the will of the Lord. Numbers 22:38, I have no power to say whatever I want. And Numbers 23:8, how can I curse those who God has not cursed? Wonderful. All this is so wonderful. It's very, very true. God is immutable, which means he is not going to change his mind. He is not going to be able to be bought out. God can't be bought out, and if he wants to bless his people, he's going to bless his people, and there's nothing that Balaam can do to stop that. Now, a couple of points here in the story. The king meant this for harm against Israel. We know that. God turned that into good, and we can find this in 4 other places in Scripture. I was amazed to find this in places like Deuteronomy 23:5, where it says God turned the desired curse into a blessing. It's in Joshua 24:10. It's in Nehemiah 13:2, and it's in Micah 6:5. Every time Balaam opened his mouth, he ends up blessing Israel. Now, it's interesting that these 4 blessings are actually prophecies that explain a very, very high-level overview of the history of Israel. Let me quickly show you how. Symbolically, we can see a big picture history of Israel in these 4 blessings. In the first blessing, Numbers 23, verse 1 and 2, they are chosen, they are set apart, they are considered righteous. Second, in Numbers 23:21, they are justified. It says, no iniquity is found in them. There is no curse and there is no trouble. God has justified his people. 3, In the third blessing, they will receive an inheritance. When we read about tall trees and waters and offspring, it means that they have all they need. These are signs of blessing, and in 24/7 it talks about them having an exalted kingdom, a great king. It says, when Christ will devour the nations, break their bones, shoot with arrows. This is a picture of Christ's second coming, when he comes back as their king and he defeats their enemies. This is 24:8 and 9. And then we see in the fourth blessing, a star will arise from Jacob. We see a ruler, a great king. Whenever we read about a scepter, we know this is talking about a king. He will conquer all his enemies in 24:18. And this is a picture of Israel in the millennium, when Christ comes and he takes his rightful place as king. I believe this is a picture where he has conquered death, and he has conquered the enemies militarily and spiritually, when Satan is defeated for all times and Jesus overcomes him. Now, this isn't a time that is yet to come, but this we can see just kind of a big picture history in these blessings. Now, interesting, in the last couple of minutes, I wanted to tell you something about Balaam. It looks like he's a good guy, and it looks like he has God's interests at heart, and he looks to be on the up and up. But if we look deeper, we can see that there is something else going on with Balaam that is less than to be desired. In Jude 11:11, it says, this is a man that deceives people for money. In 2 Peter 2:15 and 16, we can see that he loved to earn money by doing wrong. Joshua 13:22 tells us that he used magic to tell the future. I had no idea there were so many scriptures about this guy in the Bible. But in Numbers 22:12, if you look closely, the first time he asked God, God told him not to go. But when he saw the wealth and he wanted the wealth, remember, he went back a second time and asked God again. Did you ever wonder why God said it was okay to go the second time? Do you think God just changed his mind? Well, God didn't change his mind, and I believe that God did not want him to go at all. But what was happening here was this was a test. He was giving Balaam over to the longings of his heart, and it was a test to see what he would do. God knew that he really wanted the reward, and so God gave him up to his passions. It appeared to be an okay, but it really wasn't an okay. And we see this from the angel when he stopped the donkey in verse 22. It says that God was angry and confronted him. And it says, you are thinking about and acting on a secret desire that you have in your heart to oppose me. No inner longings can be concealed from God. No inner passions can be hidden from him, for he knows everything. In 2 Peter 2:16, it describes this as a mad course. Balaam was on a crazy course to do something very, very wrong. God was speaking through the angel, but Balaam had to be talked to first by a donkey. He had to be humbled in this way in order to hear what God was really saying as he was confronting this sin that was in Balaam's heart. Notice Balaam confessed his sin, but only one part of it. He said that he shouldn't go. He confessed that part. But what he didn't confess inside of his heart was the true sin, is that he desired money more than being righteous. So we see here that it was a mad course to go, that God used a donkey to rebuke him and to confess his sin. Balaam should have stopped after the first time, but there was some longing in his heart for money, glory, and power. God oftentimes allows us to follow the desires of our heart, sometimes in a test, and sometimes to show us, to get us to confess, to show us our sin. You know, this lesson has shown me something. I used to think that an open door always meant that we had God's approval. But this lesson shows me that if my inner motives and the inner desires of my heart are not in alignment with what God wants, and if they're not truly right, that this opportunity that may be before me may simply be a test, and it might not be God's will at all. So this calls into question, what motivates us? If you are in a position where you're making a decision right now that seems to be very difficult, Challenge your motives and see what your motives are in wanting to pursue this course of action. You know, we can fear God and have a relationship with Him, but something will always keep getting in the way of that relationship if we don't acquire power over our passions. And this was Balaam's problem. So, what are your motives? What are your passions? Perhaps this is a time where we can look inside of ourselves and ask God to show us what the true desires of our heart is, and if there's anything inside of us that we need to confess before the Lord. Well, I hope this lesson has been a blessing to you. I know I have thoroughly enjoyed it. As I do each and every day, I enjoy so much Bible study with you. Blessings. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day, and I can't wait to see you again tomorrow. Shalom.